Plain Truth, a show where we get into some of the mysteries, anomalies, and the dirty underbelly of the world around us. I'm your host, Paul, and joining us this week we have Lynn, the Psychic Focus Lady. Lynn, are you there?
I am. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming. Appreciate it. And along for the ride is my friend Melody. Melody?
Hi, glad to be here. Looking forward to this.
Okay, well, Lynn, some of our listeners may not be familiar with your work and how you've been doing what you've been doing. Could you give us a little bit of an intro? First, tell us your website, and then how you got into all this.
Sure. My blog that I work on is psychicfocus.blogspot.com, and that's where I do kind of general readings, world interests, or really things that people want to know about. That's where I go in and people submit questions to me, and I go into them and I get what I get, and I post what I'm able to find based on what I call as a focus session. I also do personal readings, and they consist of email readings or phone readings, and that's kind of what I do regarding my intuitive work. And the way that I got into this, when I was younger, I knew I was different, and I kind of hid from all of the experiences and feelings and things I was able to see that other people couldn't see. I didn't look at it like a gift, and to me it was more of a curse. That's how I viewed it. I knew that things weren't right. I questioned if I had a mental illness. I just didn't know. I grew up in a really conservative home, but as I got older, met other people, kind of opened my eyes, and my husband's really the one that kind of flipped the switch for me, and he, talked to me and pondered things and made me realize that, possibly these feelings I have are me experiencing things in a different realms, experiencing, spiritual phenomenon and paranormal experiences and all these kind of things. And he really encouraged me to try to open up as much as I resisted it, because everything I'd ever taught, things you see on TV and experiences that you have are typically not positive. So you're kind of programmed with this negative influence, and to convert that over and willingly open that up, that was a pretty scary moment for me. And it took me a long time, and kind of a lot of convincing on his part. He's so supportive of me. And, it kind of snapped one time when he bought me a psychic reading for my birthday. And I went and I had one, and just so happened the person that did the reading offered a class. So I went to the class, and I realized it's like everything made sense and everything felt so natural. We did a thing called psychometry, where you just take a random object from somebody, and I did it. And I was amazed at what I was able to get when I relaxed my mind and allowed my thoughts to flow. It was almost, ignoring that rational part of you that wants to discount things and question things and say, no, that's not right. Or, the part that has the embarrassment of having the random thought, all of that. I just kind of quieted that down. It helped that there were other like-minded people there. Everybody there was the same as me, and we just began practicing. Well, I would come home and I'd talk to my husband about all of this, and I would get so excited, and it would be so cool. And he said, you got to document this, keep a journal so you can organize your thoughts and go back. One, you can see how well you've grown or, learn from it. So it was actually him that started to create the blog as a way to keep, a journal of my experiences and things that I was doing, between things I would do during class and maybe a question that he even had. We'd sit down and he'd ask me stuff, and, we would go about it that way. So that's how sort of the inception of the blog started. And it's so humbling as to where it's at now. I never, ever would have thought that other people would, care about all this stuff that I'm doing, but it's really turned into this amazing thing that I love it. I feel like I'm helping people. It's like served as this meeting spot where like-minded people can get together and collaborate. I mean, people share information, I share information. It's just turned into this amazing thing that I'm so fortunate that's even happened to me. And that's really how the blog started.
Well, that sounds interesting. I'm kind of curious, when you were doing the I mean, I think most listeners are familiar with psychometry to some extent. They've tried it once or twice. Um, when you do your sessions, how do you, with a target, let's say somebody gives you a target, it could be their life or it could be some broader thing in the news. How do you take that target and how do you start?
Well, the way that I start, and I'm a firm believer in the intent that you put into it. When people ask me for a personal reading, I don't require a bunch of background, information like their full birth date. Some people give me that, but I don't require that. But what it is I read the request in my mind, and that's the intent. I mean, I should back up. You first start with putting the intent. You want the most truthful information. You want to talk to the most highest frequency energy out there. Like you want to be on that higher level even going into a reading. But the second thing that I do is I read what it is. If it's a personal request, I read that, and my intent is to know the truth and what this person, needs to know and how it's going to help their life. Or if it's, a more broad question, that's what I put out there. But I focus on the question, and that's my intent. And then from there, I go into this thing, I call it, it's like a mini meditation is what I would call it. And for people that maybe haven't had the experience or know what it is, it kind of feels like I'd say in a daydream. You're fully conscious, but you're kind of out of it. It's almost, if you've ever looked at a magic eye book, how you look through the book, you don't really look at the photo. It's almost like you lose focus. You kind of just focus on something distant but nothing specific, and I allow things to come to me. A lot of times I'll see maybe an image in my mind. I'll see maybe a scene from a movie or a TV show. I'll hear a phrase. Like in my mind, I'll hear a phrase, or maybe I'll even smell something or taste something. I've had that happen to me a lot. And then the last thing I do is I pay attention to my body and how I feel. Am I having, if someone's asking me about something health related, am I having a pain? Am I having, a certain feeling? And I've learned that all of that stuff matters. The biggest thing is not to discount what you're thinking or feeling and write it off. That's your rational mind wanting to kick in and make sense of things. This is truly, I feel, you have to allow your subconscious the opportunity to share with you whatever it is that it wants to share with you, because deep down it knows. We're all connected to a greater consciousness, and all you're doing is allowing that information to enter. It's like you're, on the phone with someone else, and you're allowing that connection to happen, and that's how I do it, and I just kind of go from there. And the strange thing is, too, and I've had a lot of people ask me this, I'll do a reading, and, whether I write it and put it on the blog or whether it's a personal reading that, I've gone into great detail with somebody, they might ask me about it maybe, a month later. And honestly, it's like I might remember doing it, but I don't remember a lot of the details. And someone will say, oh, you told me this or you told me that. And I can't even remember that. I had someone that I did a reading for. She wanted to know about her father, if he was still alive, because he hadn't been in her life for a long time. And I said, yes. And I kept seeing this long hair, and he had a bandana. And he had some kind of a necklace or whatever. And I had totally forgotten about this reading. And she came to me like a year later. And she's like, yeah, do you remember that reading that you did for me? And I said, yeah. And she was asking about the hair. And I said, well, I don't remember talking about the hair. And she was telling me about the necklace. And I told her, I don't remember saying any of those things, but they were significant to her because she ended up finding her dad. But, it's just things like that. It's like things go through me, but it's not that I can really register them for recall later. And I think that's a hard thing for people to understand, but I've had that experience a lot. Some of my circle of friends who also work in the intuitive world have had that too. I'm not sure if you've ever heard that, but yeah.
Yeah. Uh, by the way, do you use any tools? You know, some people use dowsing and remote viewing. You create ideograms and use a pen or pencil. Um, do you just essentially start visualizing and then try to tap into the frequency, or?
That is what I do, but the one thing that I do is I'm all about crystals and using those for protection and using those to kind of maintain, a certain vibration when I go about doing a reading. Do I
Uh-huh.
have to have my crystals? No, but it's more of a comfort thing for me because I feel like I have so much energy around me and flowing through me that um, I want to be cautious too to protect myself and my family and my home because, when I'm doing this, I'm doing it out of my home, and I'm just very, I would say, ultra protective of that. And I think the fact that I am so cautious about it is what allowed me to get over the fear because I realized that I do have control. I just have to be smart about it and not careless. You don't just let anything in. You don't, you have to fine tune and focus and set parameters. And when I realized how, strong we are, I mean, people are strong, but you have to believe it too. That goes back to the whole intent thing. But, you know, that's helped me a lot. So yes, I do use crystals a lot. And the strange thing is someone told me a story one time about how crystals work. Her boyfriend had heart issues and she had a crystal made for that or bought one for that or whatnot. She said, I actually watched it crumble and I thought, wow, they actually physically react. I'd never had that experience, but I'll tell you, I have a clear crystal quartz that I hold almost in every reading I do. And depending on the day or the situation I might be in, I might even carry it in my pocket all day. And the crystal, when I got it, it was absolutely, it looked flawless. You could see through it. It looked clean. It was a pristine crystal. Well, now it is cracked. It has like cloudiness in it. It looks so used, and I have to believe that it's protecting me, and that's like the negative energy, or it's the stuff that it's shielding from me. So yeah, I have a lot of faith in crystals and that they do work. I've seen mine actually physically change over the duration of the past couple years that I've been doing this.
Are there any crystals you recommend? I mean, either for protection or for improving psychic ability?
Um, the clear crystal quartz just feels like kind of I would say a catch-all. I think crystals in general, if you go to a rock shop and you hold your hand over them, you'll have ones that just kind of draw you in. So I wouldn't say that I have any one that would be the absolute. I think everybody's individual and everybody's unique. I also like orgonite. I use that a lot. I wouldn't say that's my go-to, but I do have it, throughout my home. Um, but I do recommend crystals. I just think the person has to go in and kind of experiment. You can read what the different ones do, but I feel that even more than reading them, if you just walk past them and kind of let your hand hover over top of them, you'll have one, maybe your hand will get really hot, or you'll get like this staticky electric feel. You'll actually kind of connect to the vibrations, and I would go about it that way and see what resonates best for you.
Mm-hmm. Do you use any like as a necklace or something like that?
I don't. I don't have anything that's like that. I think that stuff is beautiful. I mean, I think it could be helpful. I just usually throw them in my pocket or throw them in my purse. I keep, some in my car. Um, and at one time I pondered, I said to myself, is it actually the crystal or is it the positive intent that I put behind it? Because you kind of elevate yourself when you think about it. Like you think this is protecting me. Well, if you believe you're protected, you're going to be protected. So it's kind of the law of attraction at work. It's, the crystals. I feel like everything kind of works in harmony.
Yeah. And the crystal, is it usually rose? What kind of quartz or?
Mine's just clear crystal quartz, but I mean, I think they're all great. It's just what one is calling to you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that makes sense. Um, okay, so that's kind of like the general idea of how you might start. Um, are there any differences between when you do a reading about a person as opposed to an event? Is it typically like people are asking health kind of
Um,
problems, or what? How does that work? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Something abstract like I don't know, some airplane accident or something, as opposed to somebody's health or whatever. They seem so different.
well, I'd say the biggest difference for me when I do a reading that's a personal reading,
Hmm.
and personal readings can range from health to relationships to, they're having trouble with their job, or they're going to move, or um, just anything. Sometimes people are a little lost, and it's hard to have that look into your own self, and you need someone else to kind of tell you or help you, or maybe even tell you something you already know. But I get those type of questions, and people will come to me and ask me things. And I think the biggest difference between addressing that type of a reading versus, like a world event is when you're doing the personal ones, because, I do get the feelings, and I have, I'm what they call an empath. Like, I'll feel the emotion, or I'll feel the pain or the struggle. And that comes through to me so much stronger because you're dealing with a person, and the energy is so specific to them. Whereas when you're dealing with a world event, yeah, there might be emotion tied to it. You might um, feel sadness, but it's such a more of a generalized, the energy. Like, you might feel this
Abstract.
negative energy. Yeah, it might be like negative energy, or it might be uplifting, or it might be inspiring, but it's not the daily emotional stuff. And I think that's the biggest difference for me. It works the same way as far as, you know, getting into my zone and doing it. You're still in that same mental place, but the way it comes through your body is it's different.
Oh, I've got a question. Do you get any requests that I guess you'd say are the kind of classic ones, like, is this the person for me? Should I be thinking marriage?
I do get that, and a lot of times I'm able to give my impression of how I feel. Like I'll tune into their energy and tell them what I'm getting. And I always end those type of readings with saying, but trust your gut. I don't ever want to say, well, don't marry this person or do marry this person, but I tell them what I think. Like, I'll tell them I feel they're trustworthy, or they have positive energy, or um, they're going to be a good companion, or I feel, maybe I feel a maternal nurturer, or I see someone who, has a lot of aggression, like whatever it may be. I'll tell them what I'm getting and what I feel based on what they're asking me. But I do always advise people, you should trust your gut too. I'm just trying to give you a little insight from my perspective of what I'm able to get.
Yeah, it just seems like some of these are kind of tough. People are, oh, what can you say? They want the absolute answer from a psychic method,
Mhm.
but in the real world, maybe there aren't. Like, let's say somebody has a health problem. Well, the real thing is you've done stuff wrong for 30 years, right?
Mhm.
You've been drinking too much. You haven't been exercising, right?
Yeah,
they,
and
they, yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I'm just saying people sometimes, I think, they are looking for an answer, and sometimes, life is complicated.
And that's true. And when they have me hone in, like maybe they've been a smoker for years and years and years, and they're calling me and wanting to know about their health. Well, I might pick up on their lung problems and go into detail about that. And I can even tell them things that they can do to improve their life. I can't reverse the effects of what they have. And, sometimes I even tell people things that maybe they don't want to hear, but it's what they need to know. So I tell people that too, that if you're going to ask me something, I'm going to tell you, I always pose it, what's in your greater good to know, and I'll give them that answer. Um, So yeah, I mean, it can put me in strange situations, and I've had to tell people things that are are sort of uncomfortable to tell them, but they needed to know because that's what I got. And I sort of make a personal rule that, if you ask me a question, I'm going to tell you what I get, and I won't hold back. I may try to say it as polite as I can, but you're still going to get that message.
Mm. Hey, I've got a question. How is it different for you now from when you first started?
I
Are
would
the impressions any different?
Well, I think what happens, at least from my experience, what's happened over the past couple of years is I've built up some confidence. I'm still my own worst critic, and nobody's 100% right all the time. And if I do something that's wrong, I mean, it's always kind of a humbling, put me in check type thing, and I just work on it or try to figure out, did I misinterpret what I saw? Did I not hear it right? But I'm a lot better with that. I'm better with the way that I interpret things because my what I call mental dictionary is getting bigger, and I'll get confirmed symbols. I know that when I see an image of someone that's passed away and they have like a praying hands position and they bow down, it's because they're wanting to like say that they're sorry for something. It's like I've developed what certain images mean, so I know how to relay that information correctly, and that takes time and practice to get better at that. And that's ever evolving. I don't know that you can ever max that out, but occasionally I'll get something and I'll tell someone I've never seen this before. And sometimes what I get is literal. It will be exactly the way I describe it, and sometimes it's symbolic. So I usually give them both things. I'll tell them what I'm seeing and what it means to me. Now, it may mean something a little different to them, and that's how I'm learning, and I'm learning how to develop that. So it's really building confidence, take whatever constructive criticism I get and grow from it, and continue to, build my mental dictionary to be more accurate and be more understanding of what it is I'm seeing and feeling.
So do you now have, I'm assuming this mental dictionary is kind of like images, archetypes?
Yes. I get certain ones that I see a lot, and, it might be a snapshot from a moment in my life, but I know how that's supposed to relate, whether it's maybe you didn't trust someone. Well, I have my own personal situation that I had that I always go back to that. So if I see that, I realize these people have a trust issue, or, maybe you are in a job and you feel that you're being underutilized and you're looking to move up, but there's just nowhere to go and you're at this point of utter frustration. I know someone that happened to, and it really weighed on them. So every time I see that image or a scene played out with that in it, I understand what the other person's going through. So it's like I've developed little either scenes in my head, or I'll see an image or a picture, and from there I know how to relate to that person or what they're going through. It's like it puts me in a spot that's personal to me that I understand. So emotionally I'm there, mentally I'm there, and I know what they're feeling and thinking and what they're going through.
Well, that makes sense. I think we probably all really psychically think with these images. I just, maybe it's we just don't appreciate it, and maybe it happens more in dreams or other things, but I think they're quite real. So when you get those images, let's say you gave an example of like a trust issue or something. Can you then, how do you take that and then kind of narrow it down into more details for the client in question?
It really somehow, and I know this is going to come off so non-specific, but it's almost like after I get that clue, it's almost like I just know. It's like the words just come out, to be honest. It's not that I see a script or I hear everything word for word. It's almost like it's like seeing a story in front of you, and you might not have every word, but you have every 10th word. But somehow you just know how to connect the story based on what you have, and it just flows, and somehow it makes sense, and it just comes out. And that's really how it works. And I'm sorry I don't have a better way to explain it, but it just comes out like I said.
No, that's fine. I'm just kind of, I'm familiar with the remote viewing world and how you try to narrow down questions and ask questions to yourself and so on. And I was just kind of wondering if you've got a bit of a methodology, so to speak, right?
Well,
There are typical questions that you let's say you go from this image that a person, whatever it might be, a health question, right? A health problem.
mm-hmm.
And what should I do? Okay. Well, are there a set of standard questions you might have written on a piece of paper to remind yourself of how to progress through the session, for example? Or do you have a technique for trying to narrow down, like there's a problem in the upper body? Okay, well, is it the heart? Is it in the lungs? That do you really just kind of how you go forward when you're doing it is what I'm curious about.
Sure, because I do what I said, I kind of go, but when the flow stops and I get to that stopping point, you're right. I do probe myself with questions, and that's how I keep going. So in the example that you gave me, if someone has a health issue, the first thing I do, I put my intent out there. I need to know how to help these people, what's going on, what's going on with their health. So I mentally, I think that, and I focus on that. And from there, I put myself in that zone, and then I focus on my own body because I know the message is going to come through with me. Is my heart going to beat fast? Am I going to feel like I have trouble breathing? Do I get a headache? Do I start feeling like I want to cough? Like whatever it is, I pay attention to how I feel. And then when I start to kind of hone in on a specific area of the body, it's almost like an x-ray, and I just keep focusing until I feel like I have the right area. Now you're right. You might focus on the chest and you think, was it the heart? Is it the lung? And I just keep asking myself, and I'll say that to myself, is it the heart or the lung? It's like I'm having a conversation inside my own head until I get that it's almost like you get this confirmation of, okay, it feels right. And when you realize, okay, it's the heart, then I start thinking about it and I visualize what I think the heart either should look like or maybe what it does look like. Maybe I see a lot of fatty tissue on it, or maybe I see it's beating irregular. And then I notice my own heart. I feel like, my heart's racing. I pay attention to how I feel, and I just go with that until I reach my stopping point, and then I start probing myself with questions until the questions don't get anything else. And then it's like I'm done at that point. And I always try to feel like I get a full reading out. Occasionally I'm just, stopped, and you only can get what you're given. But I do my best to get as much as I can. And, even after I try to figure out what's going on with them, my next thing is, how do I help them? I consciously ask myself that all the time. Okay, now that you know what's going on, how do you help them? Because to me, I want people to leave a reading feeling better, like they got some insight, they maybe at least know what to do, some direction. And that's why, too, when people go into readings, I like them to ask me questions of what they want to know, because if not, I could just tell you any random thing that might pertain to your life but not make your life better. But yes, asking questions is a key component to keeping it going so it doesn't just abruptly stop.
How long do the readings usually last?
It really depends on the reading. Sometimes people will just ask me a really direct question, and, that reading might not last 5 or 6 minutes, but you might have something complex, and, I'll talk for 40 minutes straight, just going on and on and on and on, and it's just one thing after another. I will say that, a typical email reading for me, people email me and I tell them 2 to 4 questions, and I'd say on average that's at least 15 to 20 minutes. Now, I might have one that's only 12, or I might have one that's 30. It just really depends on the intensity of the question. Someone might say, hey, do you see me moving down south? Well, there's not a lot to talk about with that. I'll feel it, and I might think yes. I might even tell them what state I feel. I I might describe the environment. Maybe they have family or friends or a job. Like I'll give them everything that I see that pertains to them asking me the question, do you see me moving? But you're kind of limited, if that's what they want to know. Now, if you have someone talking about something complex with maybe their children and or a situation at work or anything like that. I mean, some of those can be very, very complex, and you can talk for a long time. And the other thing I do with my email readings is, it's kind of one-sided. It's me doing all the talking, and they're not there to interject. So I always tell people when I send it back to them after they listen to it, because they're all audio done, if they need any clarification or if, anything needed to be, described a little better, anything like that, to let me know, because I do realize that, doing it online is a one-sided reading. So that can be pretty time involved too. If maybe what I tell them, that might create 2 more questions in their mind because, they weren't there to ask me in person. So, I allow for that too, because I think that's only fair.
Yeah, I often find the email readings sometimes take more time than the live readings because you're doing the back and forth.
You're right. Some of the email readings, you might have 20 minutes in it, and that's fine, but some of them, they can be really involved. And, and I've gotten a few that when I've read them, I've told them, I said, I really should do this over the phone because I think there needs to be a dialogue back and forth, or just maybe a different format, or Skype. I've done them on Skype too, just because sometimes you need that person-to-person interaction, because the email going back and forth just gets kind of convoluted. But I would say 95% of the time it works great.
Do you ever have situations, I get this when reading the cards a lot, where the information you're getting really isn't answering what the person is asking, but it may be answering what the person is really asking, if you know what I mean? But sometimes clients even have trouble with this because they're trying to ask about maybe where they should move, and relationships keep coming up. That sort of thing.
I will say, because I put the intent out there of the specific question, it's almost like the other stuff doesn't try to interfere. But I do have times where people will ask me things, for example, about a relationship, and what I tell them is not what they want to hear. That's what I get a lot. And I would imagine you do too. They go into it with a certain expectation, and I kind of go off on something that maybe they weren't aware of or that they have even thought of. But I will say that I really focus on trying to answer what it is that they want to know, and kind of, let the other stuff go. But what they want to know might not really be what they want to know.
Yeah, I have had that happen a lot. It's particularly my husband suggested we should all get T-shirts that do this kind of work, that it says, "Is he the one for me?" on it, with a no slash going through it.
Oh, yeah.
Because, sometimes he is. A lot of times I tend to get, I don't know what happens to you, I tend to get basically a good split of people. Either she really knows, or he really knows that they are not the one for them, or they really know they are, and the reading's just kind of confirming that. I notice the time. But what's really bad is when it keeps coming up, he's not the one for you, and the person doesn't want to hear it.
Yes. Yeah, and that's hard because, I care about people too, and I've had readings when I'm done that, I feel sad and I feel heartbroken for them, and I'm sure you do that too. It's sometimes hard to detach from all that, and you have to force yourself to, kind of cleanse yourself and be done, and go on about your day and your family and all of that. But yeah, it's hard to tell people things
Lynn?
that, yes.
Lynn, if I can interrupt there, because I think this might be important. In remote viewing, there's kind of like a process for detox, right? If you get into a situation that's particularly nasty or ugly, like people dying, some of the emotions can be pretty bad, and there can be people who are downright evil, that you're dealing with. So there's a process for trying to keep yourself safe, protected, and clean, and getting out of that. Is there anything you use if you get into something that's, excuse me, too rough?
Well, what I do, a couple things I do actually. One, I go into like this meditation and I think about a white light coming in and sort of blasting out of all my chakras. And then I take it and I fill my house full of white light and I will focus on this image. It might be for 10 minutes and I just do what I would call an ultra cleansing that way. That's something that I've done in situations where I've just felt like a lot of negativity hanging on, maybe kind of being disruptive in the house. Saging the house, I've done that a couple times. That that works really well. I think that's not something I feel I need to do often, but at least maybe every 6 months I'll go and sage my house really well. And the other thing that I do, if I have someone that's kind of attached after I do a reading, especially with death, like you said, and for me, it's not even that the person's a bad person, but it's more like they found a conduit to this side and they just want to be heard, or maybe they have a message that they want to make sure gets out, and they don't want to lose that connection. That's more the situation I've had, more than like a very negative spirit trying to attach to me. But in that situation, what worked is I did a meditation. I did the white light thing that I just described. But then the last thing that I did was it's like I visualized this cord attached from me to this other person, and the cord was cut. And it's almost like I kind of mentally left it that I'm here, that I can connect you to you later if the time presents itself or need be. But for now, I have to let you go. And it was almost like that was okay, that they were okay with that, and they left me. So, I mean, I have had that situation, but it felt more like out of desperation than it did of something negative. But I'm fully aware of what you're talking about, yes.
Oh, one other thing. Is there ever a risk in what you do of getting sucked in? Again, I'm more familiar with the remote viewing world, but let's say you get kind of like where you become part of the environment. Right. Let's say there's a disaster scene, people are dying all around. And next thing you know, you're living it. You're actually there. Some use words like by location or whatever, but it can be very difficult to get out. Does anything like that ever happen?
No. And I'm so cautious when I approach things that, I really kind of guard myself from it. And I, to be honest, feel that I am so guarded that I would not be able to make that connection if it wasn't in my greatest good, because I'm so fixated on that I feel I feel very safe actually in how I approach it and the mental outlook that I take. And so I'm not really too scared of being sucked into anything. If anything, my images would stop and I just wouldn't be able to go onto that topic or go into that situation.
Okay, well, that makes sense. That's not really such a common thing. It's just, particularly if beginners do stuff and they don't really know how to control what they're doing. And this is, again, one of the reasons that beginners maybe should be very careful in what they're doing in the psychic world. They can take topics that are just too strong, like, a murder scene or something like that. They should try to avoid those kinds of things. Well, Lynn, I thought now might be a good time to move on to a couple of the topics that we'd agreed to cover in today's show, to give examples of, your work and what you find and so on. And so I suggested a couple, and would you like to go into them?
Oh, sure, that'd be great. What one would you like to do?
Well, let's start with Easter Island. I think everyone is curious about that. We know there are those famous statues there, and then most people also know that they're actually much, much bigger. They're buried in the dirt. But anyway, what did you find, or how did you approach it?
Okay, well, what I did was I put my focus on exactly that, Easter Island. I wanted to know what there was to know about it, who put them there, what's the story behind them, basically, what's going on with this island. So when I first tuned into it, the thing that I got was, it was like I was dating I would say a couple of thousand years BC. I mean, it was a very ancient time. So I'm seeing what looks like a tribe, and it's during this time, and ETs. And yes, I'm going to go into the alien thing. I'm not sure if your viewers are accustomed to talking about like the UFOs and ETs, but I'm absolutely a believer in it. I've seen it in so many times. But so the ETs that used to come during that time to that specific area, they were giant in nature. They were these huge ETs. And they would come and they would visit, and then they would leave and then come back and kind of use Earth like a pit stop. But I got in the process of them coming and going, they bred with the humans that lived on that island. And they essentially made like this human giant hybrid being. And these beings, they stayed with the humans. The pure aliens, they left, but the hybrids stayed. And they were like nurtured by the humans. And they were also viewed as being these very strong and protective and like almost like a good luck. And they were kind of viewed like a god in their own because they were big. They were maybe not as big as their ET, parents, the ET species that was giant, but they were fairly large, like maybe 8-9 feet tall, compared to the tribes people that looked to be, 5 feet tall. They looked very small, very meek and whatnot. And what I saw was these, huge human ET beings are the ones that actually built these monuments to like represent their heritage, and these ETs were viewed as like gods and protective, and they had this quality about them, and they wanted to kind of memorialize them, I guess, and put up monuments and erect these things. So when you see these statues, and yes, they're enormous, but if you take these giants and have them work as a team and erect them, it's not the task of what we see now. So it's like that's how I saw this all unfolding. And then I had questions of, well, why did the ETs go and not come back? Because essentially what happened is most of the tribe ended up dying due to hardships and starving. And I got that the giants that lived there ended up dying out because they had a really short lifespan. I guess the properties here on Earth aren't conducive to supporting a giant. I kept seeing like the moon and the water. Maybe gravity was a factor, but it just felt like there was such a like a pulling or a I don't know. I felt it was more gravity centered, or just the makeup of Earth wasn't conducive to having these larger beings, and consequently they started to die out. And then the village people also started to die out. They felt it was because they were losing, these giant ETs that, or, half ETs that were the protector race around there. But so everybody started kind of dying out. But what was left behind are these awesome monuments. And then I had this thought too, that if you were to go and maybe some of the natives that live there, you would see some residual effects of the DNA. Like you might find someone that's, almost 7 feet tall, like would be really outstanding compared to the norm. And that's because they are like a diluted version of, one of the descendant of one of these giant alien tribes. And
so you think the people there today have some DNA in common with the people who built the statues?
Yes, I think it's highly diluted, but occasionally, you're going to have one of those genes turned on where you're going to allow the height to break through. And I feel like the norm, people are fairly normal, and then you're going to have one or two just extremely tall people stand out in the crowd. And that's because in their DNA, they have like this gene to be a giant, and it's going to be apparent. And, the other question I asked myself is I said, where did these giants even go? And I got that they're not even in this solar system, that they're on this planet that looks reddish orange. And they can breathe oxygen, but their issue is they have to live somewhere that the gravity pull is not as hard because their life can't sustain what our gravitational force is. It's like they can't function. They can't thrive that way. So it was a cool reading. It was, I thought it was really interesting, but that's kind of how all this story unfolded.
Did you get a purpose for why they have these statues all facing out into the ocean?
I didn't get anything directionally about that. I just got that they were there to kind of serve and worship and, like kind of pay homage to their history and to where they came from and, this alien race that came here.
And did you happen to get any feeling that they went to other places? Some speculate non-Madal or even South America or whatever. Did you get any feeling of other places they may have gone?
I didn't, but I didn't really hone in on that. I was so focused on, Easter Island and tell me about it and focusing in on looking at the statues that, nothing else really came through to me. I was just trying to get information regarding this.
And I guess the question is, did you kind of see the decline? Is that part? Did you? I mean, you're saying how they just gradually couldn't handle the gravity. Did you get any idea of like flooding, natural, or is it just a really super slow decline?
Well, what I got was, these giants had a very short lifespan, so they just slowly died out and they diluted down. It wasn't that all of them died at once. It was more like they just weren't there to keep replenishing, and the ETs quit coming back. Once they found a new home in a different solar system, they quit coming back. So when you have this super diluted race, it just eventually kind of dilutes down to almost nothing, where it just wasn't there. They weren't there to keep it going on. And the way that I saw a lot of the tribe die is just starvation and disease and hardships, and they felt like all of that was attributed to the giants not being there and the alien race not coming back to either save them or help them. But that's kind of how I saw all of that civilization start to fall apart.
Is that why the statues were buried? Because they
I did not. I actually did not get that. I don't know why they were buried. I didn't even get a visual on that. I think I got so sidetracked with these giants that I kind of went on that route when I started to fixate on it.
Well, one possibility is simply that they're older, right? If they were from the Ice Age period, then over time the dirt would have accumulated. So it's possible that they're not 2,000 years old or whatever. They're 10,000 years, whatever, 12,000 years old or something.
Oh yeah, I felt like it was at least 2000 BC when they started at this civilization. I felt like my mind dated me there to begin. And you're right, it could just be land and dirt and everything washed up and has built up like that over the years. I don't know, and to be honest, I didn't get that in my reading, so I can't really confirm or say either way.
Oh, that's okay. I was just curious because.
No, it's a good question. I didn't even think to go that way. I sometimes get kind of tunnel vision on what I want to know, and I just go down that path, and I didn't venture out.
Well, what you're talking about in terms of giants or like ETs mixed with humans or whatever, one would imagine that if it happened in a certain place like Easter Island, it might well have happened in various other places around the planet.
I think England had some giants there too, and the same thing happened. I don't necessarily see like these type of monuments there, but I've had that visual before, not in this reading, but in previous readings.
Well, maybe one day you can do a reading on some of the stuff in Bolivia or parts of South America, or for that matter, some of the giant megaliths around the planet, like Baalbek
Oh yeah, that would be.
in Lebanon. You wonder if normal humans did that. They just seem so gigantic that you really, really wonder why normal humans would have done those things. Well, let's see. Is there any other things with Easter Island that kind of stood out to you that you'd like to mention?
I don't think so. I think I touched on all of it, unless you have something else.
Well, I was kind of curious about, I mean, there are these stories of like wars, the long ears or whatever and the short ears and stuff like that. Is that all kind of like after the fact? This is after the people who built them are gone?
Yes, because I get that who built them and what happened during that time is completely disconnected to maybe what was even there at, 500 AD or 700 AD. I get the stories carried on, the legends carried on, but the people are completely different. It's just a completely different time. So, yeah, I feel like what you're talking about is very disconnected from the beginning of when all this happened or near the beginning.
Mm. Okay. Well, I guess that's about all I can think of off the top of my head. Got one last thing. Did you have any visual on the types of ETs? I mean, you're saying they came from this reddish, orangish planet. Did they have body types that more or less resembled humans?
They did, and to be honest, when they made those statues, they felt like replicas of the ETs. I feel like the ETs resembled and looked very close to the way the statues looked. And granted, yes, they bred with humans, which gave them a little more human characteristics, but or at least humans, in present day, what we would think are human characteristics. But visually, they felt like what the statues look like.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I mean, a lot of people speculate that species like humans are all over the galaxy, more or less. And that, our cousins look like X in this area and they look like Y in some other area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that might even change. The DNA might be impacted by energies in outer space, right? I mean, or local suns or whatever. It's all very speculative, of course. But when you start talking about, aliens, then you really kind of have to wonder what they look like and how close they resemble humans. Okay, well, I think that's about it on that one. I don't have any other questions on that. So why don't we get to the other topic, the plane crash for JFK Jr. What
Sure.
did you see with that?
Okay, well, the first thing that I got when I tuned into him in this situation and his death and really anything that was going on in his life at that time, I got that he was so much like his dad. And I heard the phrase over and over throughout the reading that he's following in his father's footsteps. So, I'm asking myself, well, what exactly does that mean? And the first thing that came up was, everybody talked about his dad and Marilyn Monroe and all that kind of stuff. Well, it came through to me that the JFK Jr. was having issues like that too with, relationships and so forth. But it was almost like something came through and it was so strong and it said, but don't judge him because he really had the people's best interest in mind. So make sure you disconnect his personal life and all the stuff that you hear, even though much of that personal life stuff is true, let that go because that really doesn't matter. He really looked out for people and he cared for people. And then I heard at one time during the reading, I kept hearing Ron Paul. Ron Paul, he's big into auditing the Federal Reserve and the money and, kind of how the country's run. And he's just very wanting people to kind of stand up and, respect their rights and all this kind of stuff. But I get that JFK Jr., he was a lot like that too. And he really wanted to evoke change, and he really wanted to make things better. He also, after his dad died, kind of wanted to, there was a lot of suspicion around his dad's death. And I get that he really never had closure from it. And he did a lot of digging. He did a lot of investigating about it. And there were so many things that were inconsistent. There were so many things that were maybe, haphazardly handled. And he kind of put the story together, and he realized that the CIA was behind his dad's death. And it was almost like I felt like he wanted to whistleblow that, or he wanted to somehow let that out, or maybe he even let that out. And, when you want to rock the boat and you, even though you have the people's best interest in mind and you want to spread truth, maybe to stop it from happening to someone else, or get, these, people that are maybe a little crooked to have to pay for what they've done, that upsets people, especially if you have other people with other agendas that have power and everything else. So, I get that there's all this political stuff going on, and around this time, people looked up to JFK Jr. and had a lot of respect for him. It was almost like the people that loved his dad kind of loved him, and I saw that he really wanted to give back. And this was like a really critical time, and people didn't want him changing anything. They didn't want him talking. They didn't want him doing this stuff. And I got that basically he was murdered. The way that I saw it is I saw his plane, and I kept wanting to look at the gas tank, and I felt like something was altered or put into or done to the gas tank, but it looks like the gas tank exploded. At least that was the visual I got. If I'm seeing it correctly, that's how it came across. And that's how the plane actually went down. There was nothing negligent on his part. There was nothing weather-related. I couldn't see anything. It just, when I said, well, what happened to the plane, in my mind, I went straight to the gas tank. Well, then, so from there, sometimes the story has to unfold backwards to me. So I start at that point, and I say, well, how did anything happen to that, or who had access to it? And from there, I got that it was, the people working on the plane, but the people working on the plane got their information from the security detail. So then I'm trying to figure out, well, who is behind all the security detail? And I was ending up trickling it backwards to the CIA again. But the weird thing is when I got to that, I saw an image of Bush Sr. And when I did, and I saw his face, it was like his ears turned into like these pointy ears, and then his face stayed the same, but his ears kept doing this weird thing. It felt negative, it felt dark, it felt like there were horrible intentions behind it. So it was almost like he was in control of the orders at the CIA, who contacted the security detail, who got a hold of the people working on the plane, and that's who made the alterations to the plane. And then I got that, I asked myself if George Bush knew what was going on, and it was weird. I got this phrase, and it said that all his job is just to basically be quiet and keep his mouth shut. Like, he knew that this was happening. He was being prepped to be president, and all he had to do was just keep quiet and just go with the flow. And then I got to that after the plane went down and he died, when they got his body, I just got something it was like it was negligent. It was, they jumped to the assumption of, the plane went down and it was an accident and all that, but in the process of being able to claim it as an accident and already kind of diagnosing what happened, they tainted evidence, and they just handled things so sloppily, because it was like, what's the need to take evidence? We already know it was an accident. Or what's the need to do, X, Y, Z, because we know it's an accident. So even if you were to think about what happened later and want to contest it or investigate it, you really can't, because the evidence is already either destroyed or contaminated or, who knows what. So I get there's a lot of issues surrounding that, because even people that wanted to go back really didn't have that option. It was just, it's like it was handled hastily and it was handled sloppily, and, it was over and done. But yeah, that was a different reading for sure. But that
did you get any feeling that he was like about to run for Senate or anything like that?
I felt like he was in a position where he was going to hold a high office where people would pay attention to what he says. I feel like he talked a lot, and people listened, but it wasn't. He didn't have the authority, I guess, and I felt like that was close. Like he was at a point where he could actually make change. It wasn't just talk. What he said could actually happen. It could evoke some kind of something that, people with ulterior motives would have never wanted to happen. Yeah.
Well, I once ran into a guy who worked in the courthouse there in that town, and he said that everyone in the government there, the prosecutors and the police chief and all that, they all knew it was a bomb, or in any case, it was blown up. Well, I mean, a bomb or, some alteration that caused the tank to explode or, whatever. But,
yeah.
And, obviously that's why you had such a hasty cover-up at the end. And then, of course, the media always do what they're told. So, the usual story. But, yeah, the question is why and who. And that's not so easy to answer. But a lot of people have speculated he was trying to run for the Senate. And, then, and of course the idea is, once he got into the Senate, because of his name and good looks and all that, and, he had that magazine, George, which was covering a lot of controversial topics, that would have given him a platform to be a lot more powerful than just a newcomer to the Senate would typically be. So, anyway, we can speculate there's some possible reasons. What about on the family side? Did you see, anything, his uncle Ted Kennedy? What kind of images did you get other than like the disaster scene?
Well, what I got as far as family related, I didn't go into each like an individual family member, but I got this overwhelming sadness. Of course, I mean, he just died, but the bigger thing is that I feel this rage as if the family wanted something investigated, and people even speculated that this was not an accident. And that's where the whole evidence thing came into play, because it was like they made sure that nothing could be really investigated because of how this was handled. And I get a sense of rage behind that. Really, I mean, it was hard. It was really hard because they didn't know what to do, and maybe books and everything have come out, but I just feel this kind of explosive energy behind that.
Well, yeah, no second Camelot, right?
Yeah.
When you had that image of Bush, what were you thinking? How did that come across? Was it an anger? Was it a feeling like he was a representative? What?
Well, you hear a lot about the reptilian, agenda, and these people who kind of run on gut instinct and self-interest and that type of thing. And I felt as though that was a symbol to me that he has part of that in him, that he is very capable of working in a way that's void of emotion, that's void of empathy, that's void of compassion, as long as the agenda is being protected, meaning making money or power or protecting those people that give him power and allow him to make money. And when I see that, Sometimes I'll see a whole face morph. Sometimes I hear him talk weird. It was odd to me that it was just his ears because it wasn't his whole face. So it was almost like it was telling me that, he has it in him. Maybe he's not a full reptilian, so to speak, but he's definitely got the capability to operate like one.
Well, you're not the first with that observation, right? There are certain figures in politics who seem to be not exactly human, I guess you might say.
Yeah.
So you kind of wonder. I guess that's a question. Do you get this feeling that your subconscious is telling you, like characters to think about or focus on? Is that what you? How did you feel it at the time?
Well, what happens is his face just pops in my mind. It's almost like having a daydream. I saw him, and when you do that, you kind of hone in on it and you focus in on it. It's like, why am I seeing this? And that's what you ask yourself, because when you get these abstract visions, you start to question, why am I seeing this? Or what's he doing? Or does he have something to say? You just go through what feels right or what you want to know. And that's what I did with him. And when I stared at him, he didn't say anything. He didn't move. He didn't do anything. It's just his ears look like these big pointy, I want to say a reptilian ear, and or some kind of like pointy ear. It was just this strange image, and then it flashed back. And I even kind of did a double take, like, what was that? And it showed me again. And from that point forward, it's like I just kind of knew, in your gut, you understand what it's telling you, and you just kind of move forward from there. And I got a picture of George Bush in my mind, and I was asking him, does he know what's going on, or does he know what the plan was? And then it's like I heard in my mind that he knew about it, and his job is to just be quiet. He was being prepped to be president, so he could be kind of like his dad's puppet and help the agenda of things that, he wanted to pass, or, how he wanted the country ran. It was almost like his dad was the one in control, but, he just had to be quiet and fill the role and just do what he's told.
Sounds like maybe one day you could do a session on the New World Order. What is it and who is it? Well, again, it's just a tragedy. I mean, let's try to laugh about these things, but what can we say? Sometimes these things happen, and the political fights are pretty brutal at the top. When you were looking into this, did you get any feeling about, I guess what I would say is, as they were about to, this is a little rough, but their feelings, did they feel like, as this was happening, that they, was it so quick that they didn't even know what hit them? How's that?
Yes, I would say yes. It was like they were going along and they were fine, and it truly happened out of nowhere. There was not like engine trouble. It was not, no mayday. Like there was none of that. It was truly instantaneous.
Okay. Well, I guess we can close on that topic. I don't really have any further thoughts on it, unless you might have anything you want to add.
No, I think I pretty much covered everything that I'd had on it.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, we'll wrap up the interview soon, but before we do, could you tell people your blog again?
Oh, sure, that'd be great. It's psychicfocus.blogspot.com.
Okay. And on there, I assume people can get your contact information or anything else they might want.
Yes, if you want an appointment or if you need to email me, I'm also on Facebook and Twitter, and all of that contact information can be found through my blog.
And are there any projects you're working on these days that sound particularly interesting?
Actually, I did something a little different today. You focus on these dark topics, and
Right.
occasionally I like to change it up and do something a little different or upbeat. I kind of went into the new year with this hope and kind of a goal to, you know, even on a dark topic, try to find some light or some positive takeaway, even if it's nothing else that, you're open-minded and can understand or accept truth, or, maybe you have the ability to stretch your boundaries, like that kind of thing. And so today I thought, well, I'll do something different. And what it was is someone who contributes to my blog a lot, leaving comments or asking questions, goes by the handle of Dada. He approached me and he said, "Hey, would you be interested in if I sent you some kind of bizarre pictures? Would you give me your take on them? I'll write up an entry for your blog, and we'll go ahead and put it on the blog." And I said, "Well, yeah, that'd be great. It gets kind of just changes it up and maybe gives people something different to look at." So today, he gave me his work, and we went ahead and put it up on the blog, and I got some positive feedback on it. People really liked it. They like changing it up, seeing something a little different. And so every couple of weeks we might start doing something like that.
Well, that sounds cool. Yeah, I mean, definitely you don't want to have all negative topics. There's plenty of good out there too.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I tell you what, Lynn, thanks so much for coming. We do appreciate it, and we'll call it a wrap.
All right. Well, hey, thank you for having me. I had a good time, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.